now we are heading to another speech. So I would like to invite Professor Dr. Dantur Wickramasinghe from Adam Smith Business School, University of Glasgow in the United Kingdom. Professor Dr. Dantur Wickramasinghe is a professor of management accounting in the University of Glasgow. He has joined Glasgow after 19 years of research and teaching at the University of Manchester and 1.5 years at the University of Hull as a professor of management accounting and the director of the Center for Accounting and Accountability Research. He is a regular speaker at research and professional forums, including the workshops organized by CMAI. Currently, he's the Chief External Examiner at Manchester Metropolitan University and the External Examiner at the University of Aberdeen and continues PhD supervision at Manchester. The presentation name is the Risk-Based Management Controls in Less Developed Countries, a Model of Analysis.
Thank you very much for the excellent introduction. Welcome you all to the 4th International Conference. I don't know how I'm going to convince you after a wonderful presentation by my colleague Gabriel. Today, I'm going to talk something, despite the topic here, I'm going to talk something about research in general. Lots of Asian countries I have visited are very much bombarded with quantitative research, seeking hypothesis testing based on scientific methodologies. In Europe, we are very much criticizing that approach for, again, scientific reasons. Lots of accounting researchers in British universities are taking a different approach. I am also in that category. That approach is case study, qualitative case study approach. At Glasgow, at the moment, I have 6 PhD students under my supervision. They are all doing single case studies. For a period of 4 years or so, they are studying one single organization as a case study. They are writing a story of that company, story of that company's management practices, accounting practices, corporate governance practices, sustainability reporting practices, risk management practices, etc., etc. Recently, one of my PhD students have finished this particular project, risk-based management control. Risk idea is a novel global discourse floating around the world where people are embracing how to manage their risk. In order to understand this particular management story in organizations, lots of students are now taking a particular theory to explain their story. One of the theories is institutional logics, which I am going to talk about very briefly today. What I am stressing here is that if you are doing a qualitative case study, you must take a theory to analyze the story. A theory drawn from another social science. Without that theory, your story will be an empty story. It cannot be published in a top-class journal. Lots of top-class journals dedicated to qualitative research, journals such as Academy of Management Review, Organizational Studies, Accounting Organizations and Society, Accounting, Auditing and Accountability Journals, etc., etc. They need a theory in their qualitative study. My PhD student studied an ERM, Enterprise Risk Management practice, in one single organization. In order to theorize it, he used institutional logics, which has derived from institutional theory analysis. And he extended that theory by using the idea of geopolitics. And he theorized that story to talk about geopolitical economy of institutional logics about the practices of enterprise risk management. That particular theoretical approach, using two theoretical ideas together, is called theoretical triangulation. That is how British university students doing PhD take qualitative case study research. ERM is a particular management approach where people are trying to understand how risk can be managed. I'm not going to talk very much about enterprise risk management. It is an emerging idea. I'm going to talk about how institutional logics can be used to theorize such management practices. ERM is everywhere. Companies are now embracing to translate to enhance their management practices to become very much risk-based control systems. But the problem is these ideas are coming from the West. These ideas are generated from Western institutions. They are traveling around the world. Lots of are coming from developing countries. But in developing countries, when we are trying to implement these Western ideas, there are problems. Why? In developing countries, you have your own traditions, your own cultures, your own values. Western ideas are going to contradict with these cultural values, cultural norms. Whatever the cultures you are believing in, whatever the established practices your companies have, whatever the values and norms you are adopting, they are called institutional logics. You are always governed by logics. You are always governed by established practices, established ideas, established values. They are called institutions, or in particular, institutional logics. In a company, top managers want to maximize the company's value. Value for customers, value for shareholders, value for stakeholders. That could be an efficiency logic. But at the same time, when you are trying to implement your company's practices in order to maximize such values, you have to get them done through and with people in the organization. These people in the organization have their own cultures, own understanding, own values. They could be different logics. They could be traditional logics. They could be cultural logics. They could be community logics. Therefore, several logics would come to compete with each other at the same time in a particular mode of practice. My PhD student, when he tried to understand how enterprise risk management practice was implemented in that company, found that institutional logic competition, existence of competing logics at the same time. On the one hand, you have Western-oriented efficiency logics. On the other hand, you have Oriental-based community logics in the company. Therefore, management is about trying to compete with these existing competitive, competing institutional logics. So you need to use this institutional logics idea to undertake a kind of case study analysis. As you see here, institutional logics are very structured practices. They are very much established practices. When you introduce a new idea, such as corporate governance, such as ERM, such as sustainability management, whatever, you have to confront with, as managers, confront with this institutional logic competition. That competition can be analyzed. Therefore, in research, what we do is that we take the case story, we examine what is going on, and we see how these competitions come about, and inquire into how these structures work, how these structures compete in the existing situation. One of the things that a researcher must do in undertaking a qualitative case study is that you must make a contribution to that theoretical conversation. Nowadays, institutional logics conversation is very much fashionable in management and accounting research. But the question is, when something is fashionable, when everybody is taking it, when all the journals are very much bombarded with it, how can you make a contribution to that theoretical contribution? Without a contribution, without any extension to the conversation, you can't get your research paper published in a top-ranked journal. My PhD student found a new idea which is called geopolitics to extend this institutional logics conversation. Geopolitics is about the specialty, about the place in which your company is, the place in which your organization exists. If you're concentrating on a particular place, like Dubai, like Indonesia, like South Africa, like Iran, if you are considering a particular place, you may find different contradictions in that particular place. Different cultures, different traditions, different politics in that particular place. Therefore, place is very important for us to see what is going on differently. You can write a different story about that place. Western ideas are coming to that place. Enterprise risk management, balanced scorecard, activity-based management, corporate governance, IFRS, whatever, they are landing in a particular place. The idea is being confronted with the place in terms of cultural contradictions, in terms of traditional contradictions, in terms of political contradictions. Those contradictions can be highlighted in your research paper. When you try to highlight these contradictions, what you are doing is that you are making an extension to that institutional logics conversation. Institutional logics is very much articulated in Western journals nowadays. Journals such as Academy of Management Review, Academy of Management Journal, Organization Studies, Administrative Science Quarterly, Accounting Organizations and Society, etc. Geopolitics is an interesting idea. Lots of social scientists nowadays are being interested in geopolitics to understand the peculiarity about the place. So you may be able to make a contribution to institutional logics conversation. So in order to highlight such differences, you must have a very detailed case study analysis. You can conduct a case study, you can compile a very detailed, interesting story, to do a research paper, to do a PhD, etc., etc., and you can distinguish what is going on in the world now. When you do in that way, that particular academic contribution is called theoretical triangulation. You have a particular theoretical idea, in this case institutional logics, and you have another social science discussion, in this case geopolitics. You can combine them together, and that particular combination is called theoretical triangulation. Therefore, theoretical triangulation is a particular avenue for you to make a contribution. In the end, you have a story, but you have to make sense of that story using a theoretical idea, but that is not sufficient enough. You need to actually make a contribution to that theoretical discussion. Therefore, you need to add a new idea to that theory. My PhD student is now adding this geopolitical discussion to add that particular thing. So that is how we can actually do a particular different theory. I mentioned about this ARM. By doing that, these are 3 aims that my PhD student is now working on a particular research paper. Look at these 3 aims. Firstly, we may introduce new evidence about management practice, and we are critically examine what is going on in there in terms of institutional logic's contradiction, and we can make a contribution to institutional logic's discussion by adding geopolitical ideas. Therefore, as opposed to doing a quantitative hypothesis testing, which is very much the case in many Asian countries, lots of British universities, intensive research universities, like Glasgow University, are very much interested in doing this case study research. But just a case study is not enough. You must read a lot about theoretical discussions drawn from social sciences. Nowadays, institutional logics is very much fashionable, but it is not again sufficient enough just to actually replicate institutional logics framework as it is. You need to introduce a new angle to this. To do that, you need to look at other research as well by reading other social sciences, geopolitics, geopolitical economy, geopolitical discussions is such an idea for you to introduce a kind of contribution to institutional logics discussion. So that is what I want to actually talk about today. Whatever the case study you do, whatever the new idea of management you are studying on, you can conduct a single case study in a single organization for a period of several years, but that is not enough. You need to theorize the story. Again, you have to actually add something to that theory also in the form of presenting your case study. Otherwise, journals would not publish your paper. If you are publishing a case study paper in a top-class journal, you must need a better formulated, better articulated theoretical discussion with a theoretical contribution to that case study discussion. Thank you very much.